I'm joined by the German MEP Hans-Olaf Henkel. He's from the European Conservatives and Reformists groups. He joins us from our studios, as you see, in Berlin. A very good evening to you, sir.
Good evening to London.
What do you think when Theresa May talks about a slightly different system during the transition period, a different approach to EU citizens who come to the UK? Do you think she's making a fair point?
Well, for me, it is another step of escalation rather than de-escalation in the Brexit talks. Apparently, and that's my conviction, this is a reaction to what Barnier, the EU negotiators, did say last week. He said while Britain is in the transition period, it has to swallow all rules and regulations which the other 27 countries will make law of, and but it hasn't got itself a voice during this period. So for me, this is another step of the escalation. And I think we have to start to de-escalate this whole thing. By the way, on the issue of what rights should EU citizens have when they get to the UK, I think there's a possibility of a compromise. By the way, a compromise between the soft and hard Brexiteers within the UK government on one hand, and between David Davis and Barnier on the other. And that compromise has been proposed by our group called A New Deal for Britain already some weeks ago.
I mean, that's interesting. Where are the bigger problems then? Is it, in your opinion, is it the EU being intractable today on this specific issue of freedom of movement, or is it domestic problems at home, as you are pointing to, the fractured nature of the Conservative Party when it comes to the whole issue of Europe?
Well, I think the whole thing, in my view, started with Monsieur Barnier, because his negotiation strategy is very obviously not very fair to Britain. I'll give you one example. When he said that there must be a border arrangement between Northern Ireland and Ireland before we can start trade talks, by that he has made the whole thing impossible, because I don't know of any border arrangement anywhere in the world without knowing what kind of trade talks you have. So Britain lost 6 months because of Barnier. And as far as our compromise is concerned, it's the following. I think we should start to differentiate when one person leaves from country A in the EU and goes to country B. We should differentiate how to treat this person. For instance, we could say that inherited benefits should continue to be paid by the country where he came from, or she, and only job-related benefits should be paid for by the country where this person works. That's exactly what Cameron wanted before the referendum, and he didn't get. And meanwhile, my feeling is that more and more countries believe that that's exactly what the European Union needs. And I hope if we come up with that compromise for the transition period, we could basically tell the Brexiteers in Britain, look, you got what you always wanted, because I'm convinced had this been given to Cameron before the referendum would have gone the other way.
Oh, goodness.
So I think here's an opportunity.
OK, well, that is an interesting take in itself. Just quickly before I let you go, you say it all needs to de-escalate. Do you think that ultimately Monsieur Barnier, Guy Verhofstadt, all the men we're talking about today will ultimately give a little bit more, relax a little bit more than they are currently doing? Do you think this is still a deliberate bargaining attempt on their part? They have to be seen to be taking a tough line because they don't want to encourage other EU members to do what Britain is doing.
Yeah, that's exactly what is happening. I mean, the reaction of Mr. Verhofstadt is typical for him. And by the way, everybody focuses on the negative economic effects on the UK, but I tell you, I have myself been for many years the president of the German Federation of Industries, which is the equivalent of the CBI, and I tell you, I hear increasing worried voices on the continent about the negative effects of Brexit on the continent. So it is in the continent's interest that Barnier and Verhofstadt take a different line. We should stop this talk about cherry picking and things like this. The closer Britain is to the EU, the better the deal is for the British industry, the better the deal will be also for the European industry. So it is in our own interest to offer the British the best deal possible. And being part of this movement, a new deal for Britain, I can tell you one thing. The very best thing is to call this whole thing off.
Well, there's a thought on which to end our interview. We must leave it there for now. Very good to talk to you. Thank you very much for your time tonight. Hans-Olaf Henkel, the German MEP, thanks for joining us there from Berlin.